Welcome to Beyond the Bridge, a Star Trek Multiverse podcast with your hosts, Adam and Carlos.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bridge, a Star Trek Multiverse podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Carlos. Carlos, how's it going?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's always fun to talk more Trek with you, and today we're getting right into it. There's not really any news worth sort of talking about or analyzing. So we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of the show, which is the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I've been anticipating this show coming back for quite some time because I absolutely loved Season 1. So this has been much, like I said, much anticipated, and I'm glad to have it back based on the first 3 episodes, which we're going to talk about in a sec here. But what was your anticipation level for Season 2 after Season 1?
To be honest, I was a little worried because they set the bar so high with Season 1. Like, Season 1 was one of the few shows that kind of became an appointment type watch for myself and my kid. And it just, every episode seemed to deliver the goods and give you at least one thing that made your heart soar and really made you want to embrace this show. So because the bar had been set so high, I was a little worried that they might have that sophomore stumble with Season 2. But I was certainly really looking forward to the show coming back, and almost to the detriment of things like Picard, because you're watching those and they're great and delivering the goods, but at the same time, Strange New Worlds was where it's at for me. So that's what I was counting down to.
It's like you're watching to get to the next thing. It's like, all right, the sooner I watch this, sooner it'll be over, and then we get to Strange New Worlds. But you're right, Picard did enough that it was so good that it kind of you got sucked into it, and you almost forgot about Strange New Worlds for a minute. And then when that ended, it was like, okay, but now there's Strange New Worlds, right?
That's like kind of the main event. With Strange New Worlds, that's the show for me in the new Paramount Plus Star Trek era.
Yeah, it's the cream of the crop for sure. So let's get right into it. So episode 1 is really interesting because it's the crew responding to a distress signal from La'an because she's no longer on the ship at this point. She stayed behind. And compounding the situation is Captain Pike having to go take a sort of sabbatical off ship to kind of plead the case of number one, his number one, and so he's trying to find help for her upcoming trial because, as we ended last season, she was arrested and basically kind of court-martial type thing. And now she's in danger of losing her spot in Starfleet. So he's off trying to help her, and leaves the ship in the command of Spock, which in and of itself is entertaining. Like, I think if they had done the episode where it was just watching, like if there was no action, and it was just watching, a day in the life of Spock trying to command the ship, that would have been humorous enough in its own right, because as soon as Pike tells him, "Listen, you're in charge," he's like, "Yeah, but what if something, he was like, what's going to go wrong? Like what could go wrong? It's only 2 days. You'll be fine." And you can see the panic in him, like right off the bat. To the point, wasn't there a scene where he had to go to like the medical bay and talk to the doctor about like stress relief, and like he gave him the what was the instrument? I think it was
like the kind of Vulcan lute kind of thing.
Yeah. So like, but that's more to do with his That's part nervousness and part like you can still see him dealing with his feelings for the other doctor. What's her name there?
Nurse Chapel.
Yeah, Nurse Chapel. There it is. That's it. Yeah, so it's like a dual. He's like stressing on a dual level because now he's the commander of the ship, but he's struggling with these weird feelings he's having for Nurse Chapel. So that was funny just to watch it in its own right. And then I really like they're waiting for his orders and they're like, all right, what's your like catchphrase? He's like, do I really need one? He's like, yeah, every captain has one. And the funniest part was there's utter silence for like a minute, and then he's like, "I would like the ship to go now," and that was that's just, and it's like just deadpan seriousness. I was bursting out laughing, like I couldn't stop laughing. Like it was to me it was the funniest thing. Like something so ridiculous was like and so mundane ended up being one of the funniest things to watch play out. What did you think of Spock in command?
Yeah, I thought it was a bold play to open season 2 with an episode missing your star, right? Where
Yeah,
they, for very good reasons, story wise, had Captain Pike not at the forefront of things and let Spock and the rest of the crew get a chance to shine. But it worked well because uh, it kind of had a framing device for the entire episode to really showcase the rest of the crew a bit more with Una and Pike not really in the episode at all. So it was good. It gave Spock some agency and let this version of Spock kind of um, thrive a bit and make the character his own a bit more. So I thought that was good. And I really liked the fact that it was the crew coming to the aid of just one of their mates on a
yeah,
more peer-to-peer basis
yeah,
as opposed to getting direction from on high. So, yeah, no, I thought it was a pretty bold move to use as your second episode or your first episode out of the gate for the second season, but it ended up being perfect, especially when you see the subsequent episodes play out.
yeah. And I think the aspect of it where they go uh, and rescue Laan on that, you know, I like that simply because it's going back to the roots of the original Trek, which was you'd often see them a landing party on an alien world,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of having to like blend in and adapt, and so going in that direction, I think it's in keeping with the original, which is what they're kind of trying to do. And I find that in a lot of subsequent Trek, while that is still present, it's gotten lost a bit, and 90% of the shenanigans are on the ship, or like you know, or in the air, so to speak, in space. So it's like to actually see them on the ground in a new environment and sort of trying to blend in, and then getting caught, and that brings up the whole conflict, right? That was very much like I said, it speaks to the allure of the show, and that it's going back to basics for Trek, and so I really like that aspect of it. And it also sets up what I assume is going to be sort of the main through line of the season, which is Lon kind of warns that there's sort of underground ground like bartering and selling of Starfleet weaponry and equipment, and she's getting a sense that there are forces at work trying to start a war and make it look like it's Starfleet starting the problem, because it's the not the Vulcans,
The Romulans.
the Romulans, right, are
Yeah.
the ones suspected of sort of causing this, or being, because there's a peace between the two, and it's like the threat is that if these weapons are being sold, and if Starfleet is perceived as taking the first shot or starting a war, then it would unravel all the peace and the work that's been done to create that peace. So that's the sort of mystery of that they're sort of laying the seeds for with this kind of trip, and the sort of resolution between like how they sort of at least smooth things over in this episode was really cool, because it has Spock in essentially like a drinking contest with a Romulan, I think it was, right? So, and it was funny because they notoriously, those two groups don't get along. But the comment was, when he sees Spock drinking, I can't remember what it was, the blood, what was it, some kind of blood or some
Yeah, it was like
yeah,
basically like a Klingon wine type of thing.
Oh, it was the Klingon, sorry, not the Romulans.
Yeah.
The Klingons. And the Klingon, the leader was like, "Oh, you're not like those a normal Vulcan." He goes, and so he appreciated Spock in the sense that Spock was willing to acquiesce to his custom and his way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just like I said, I like this sort of ground level. Let's go investigate a quote unquote strange new world aspect of portion of the episode. I thought I like when you see that.
Yeah, no, and you bring up a good point, and something I did maybe not recognize as much is that in the new shows they do spend a lot of time on the ship, and if they leave the ship, it's to be on another ship or a space station kind of thing with a similar aesthetic, and that goes across all their shows. So yeah, it was kind of refreshing to see a crew on the ground getting up to their elbows in the filth kind of thing, and it was a nice change of pace, or something to harken back to the original shows and whatnot. And I also appreciated the kind of commentary and that return to the Federation really taking steps to understand, new life and new civilizations type of thing. And they showcased that with the diplomacy that Spock was utilizing at the end of the episode in order to get everybody on board, and also with how they introduced their new engineer to the Enterprise. And I forget the character's name, but I quite enjoy that actress, having seen her in that Amazon show Hunters.
Carol something is her name. I'm trying to think now. All I know is she played the Penguin's mother in Gotham. That's.
Oh yeah, she did. I know her from a show called Hunters. That's actually quite good. But I really like that they kind of subtly threaded through that theme of meeting people where they're comfortable and where they can operate at, and kind of using that empathy and that understanding to build bridges and stronger relationships, which is really one of the tenets of Star Trek as a whole, right? And something we don't see in other science fiction properties. So I love the way they did that, and it wasn't overt, but it kind of just left you with this feeling, knowing that was the right way to do things. And that's always the hallmark of good writing, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the other thing about Spock is that he has to make a decision, because he tells Starfleet, look, we got a distress signal from Lahan, and should we go rescue? And they basically tell him, no, stay put, because again, tensions between us and they're high. So if we go and do anything, that is perceived as causing issue, we could upset the peace here. So stay put. But he along with the consultation of the rest of the crew, decides, well, no, we're gonna defy order and go rescue her anyway. So, but that kind of decision coming from Spock, who is typically so regimented, so basically follows orders and everything's based on logic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important little wrinkle to his character to kind of show that he's Vulcan, but he's also the human side of it is what you know.
Yeah, well, in that situation and that chain of decision making is something that we've historically just seen from the likes of Captain Kirk, right? So, yeah, it was nice to kind of see Spock put into a similar situation and having to make those type of contrary to orders decisions.
And something you said that I think this all speaks to in terms of where Spock is at is, yes, it's very in keeping with the Leonard Nimoy iteration, because you kind of have to retain a lot of elements from that, because otherwise it that's part of Spock.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of sort of like it's not like Spock is not like a character with like Superman where you have different live action adaptations and then a whole slew of different 80 years worth of comic books that you can veer off and base other interpretations on. Mm-hmm. With Spock, the genesis of that character is Leonard Nimoy, so you have to kind of retain some of that. But by the same token, what Ethan Peck is able to do is imbue and add certain things that are unique to him and his portrayal that I like. So it's not straying from the original conceit of the character, but it's not slavishly he's not imitating Leonard Nimoy, which I appreciate.
Yeah, well, and that's been a balancing act for the show and for Ethan, like right from the outset, right? Like there was much ado about the fact that they were casting a Spock in the first place and everything else. So it's something that he always have to struggle with, and it's unfortunate that fans kind of put him in that position, because I think he's done a phenomenal job, and
he has, for sure.
Yeah, I'd rather the character live on and we have a different iteration type of thing, as opposed to it having to exist solely with Leonard Nimoy.
Agreed. So is there anything else specifically from this episode you want to mention, or we can rate this episode and move on to episode 2?
Yeah, no, I do have to give props to the stuff they did with Dr. Mbega and Nurse Chapel. I thought that they were pretty cool, and with the hints at the backstory with the wartime activities of Dr. Mbenga, and Nurse Chapel was always a neat presence on the show, and I liked how they put them into a bit of a frontline action role.
Yeah, that was cool. That scene was cool. Yeah.
Episode, and I was worried for a minute there that they were going to kill one or both of them, but they brought something a little unique and a little different. Like I said, the whole episode was a great way to showcase a lot of the crew members that we haven't got to spend time with.
Yeah, and I really appreciated the visuals in that action sequence. It looked really well. Mm-hmm. Really good for a TV or streaming budget show. I think they do a lot to maximize when there are action scenes to make them look as good as possible, given I'm assuming what budget constraints they have. So it looked really good for its medium. So yeah. But with that being said, I think we've touched on a lot of the key points of the episode. So, what would you rate this episode? Give it a letter grade.
Letter grade, I'd give it an A minus. It had a lot of heavy lifting to do, and it also had the unenviable task of being the premiere of a second season type of thing, and I think it did a really, really admirable job juggling all those balls. So yeah, solid A minus from me.
I'm going to go with A minus as well. I thought, again, solid start. We got to see, it seems like all the characters that we grew to love in the first season got at least some moments to shine. Even Captain Pike, who wasn't uh, featured prominently, but what something you spoke to was, I feel what this show does really well, and this is going to come from somebody who really loves Discovery, so bear that in mind when I say this. What this show does really well is I feel like I know quite a bit about the core members of this crew, and they've taken the time to have us spend time with these characters over the first season and now the first episode of this. Whereas with Discovery, yeah, I'm familiar with Michael Burnham and Saru, right? But beyond those core two or three, the other core members of the crew you don't really get to know very well. Like so I think there's more of a spread out kind of focus, so that you're in it with the core members of this crew, like and you care for all of them. Whereas with Discovery, it's like they really only focus on two or three, and then the rest are kind of like afterthoughts. So I think this show does a better job with kind of fleshing out its core crew members.
Yeah, like I think we got there with Discovery.
Yeah, but it took all 5 seasons or whatever.
Yeah, and like especially like kind of the engineering crew and stuff like that. And I think we do have a pretty rich relationship with those characters now. But yeah, I do concede that it probably took like 2 or 3 seasons before we really started to spend time with the rest of them.
So this show seems to be doing a better job at getting us there quicker.
Oh yeah,
without sacrificing much of anything. So yeah, but they set the table for what seems to be like the overarching thread of the season as well. And so yeah, A minus from me as well. Episode 2 and then subsequently 3 are a little bit more personal in nature in terms of with specific crew members. Episode 2 really is the trial of Una Chin Riley, and it's very interesting because we get some of her backstory, and one of the reasons why she's being put on trial is because they refer to it as augmented, right? She's been the way it sets it up is that when she was younger, she was was it a illness or how did they?
Well, she was like injured, right? But like in a schoolyard kind of fight or incident that she was trying to break up, but because she was augmented at birth, but with the Federation putting in the restrictions as far as augmented people go, her parents were reluctant to let her seek medical assistance type of thing in order to, and so her life was actually at risk for a period of time until they found a sympathetic doctor. So yeah, no, this episode I thought it had some really powerful themes, and they did some tremendous work holding up the mirror to our society and people's biases and things of that nature. It was where the first episode was a lot more subtle in those things that they did as far as bridging gaps between different societies and cultures and finding common ground and kinship. This one was certainly a lot more overt in how they delivered those messages and whatnot. But like for any shortcomings it might have had, like the messaging was so powerful, and the performances were tremendous as well. Between Una and primarily the lady that played her best friend and her lawyer.
Attorney, that relationship was interesting too, because it's like I got the sense that she felt left behind, and it's sort of there's the animosity there. and it's the sense that also how can you, there's that feeling of being left behind, but also how can you sort of assimilate or want to be part of Starfleet when they want nothing to do with people who are augmented, and like what are you, what kind of message, basically her grievance was what kind of message are you sending, right? So I liked that conflict and how it got resolved throughout the course of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like you said, it speaks to our, holding a mirror to our society, which at its core, that's what Trek has always done. So for people on the internet, to say, oh, Star Trek has gone woke, it's like, where have you been since the 60s? Because
Yeah.
they've always been doing this. Like, this is nothing new. You know, um, and I just, like I said, I thought the performance by Rebecca Romaine was phenomenal. She carried the episode, and it just, again, the message is that it's be who you are, embrace it, and it's okay to be different. I think that's the core message of of the episode, but also, again, it's holding up the closed-mindedness and the bigotry that Starfleet had been employing, is kind of reflective of the society we live in. So that you can take this fantastical science fiction trappings and then shine a light on that aspect of our society. I think is very important, uh, and needs to be done. Uh, and I think, for me, what I liked the most about this episode was the way her lawyer kind of used tenets of Starfleet to kind of show how wrong they were behaving and sort of get the charges overturned. Like, the whole thing was that she disclosed her differences to a select few and then asked for amnesty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of that's why, and under those auspices, they were able to overturn the charge. So I thought the way the lawyer kind of found those loopholes was very clever and very inventive, because it didn't look like, there was a point in the episode where I'm like, okay, this doesn't look like it's going to go well for her. Like, what's gonna happen to change the tide here?
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the aspect that Starfleet's own laws were used against them to kind of shine a light and expose their bigotry. I thought that was very clever.
Yeah, well, and I do appreciate that this show, and even Discovery and just modern Star Trek in general, has kind of started to knock a bit of the shine off of Starfleet being this irreproachable entity that is always altruistic and always makes the right decisions, because it's not, it might be an ideal to strive towards, but if you're going to have complex characters who are human, or characters with various emotions, and that they are gonna make mistakes and be flawed. So that was good. I appreciated how they had an allegory for the, like, people of color and members of the gender and sexually diverse communities entering into institutions in our world that have historically been acted in a manner that was harmful towards them. And so that was some pretty powerful stuff. I did find it a bit interesting how, with having the Illyrians look exactly like humans all the time, like, I found that a bit distracting when they talk about the themes of the people that could fit in and the people that couldn't, type of thing. And so I guess it was the one time that being under the umbrella of Star Trek and having all these wacky and wonderful alien species and all these entities that are so different than us. It's like, well, why wouldn't they just fit in? And just kind of knowing how Starfleet has operated historically,
Yeah.
the more humanoid you are, the
Yeah,
more
like how would they,
rapidly.
the idea of how would they know
Yeah.
that you're augmented if, I mean, as long as you don't bring it up.
Yeah, well, and that was part of
How would they see it? How would they know, right?
well, and that was a big part of that was the whole driving force behind the episode and the whole setup of the Illyrians. And so it was that, and then coupled with the initial time that we meet the Illyrians in season 1 there, where like they almost give the idea that they're an ethereal type of species.
Yeah.
Right? So if I have a shortcoming for the episode, that was the only thing. But the strength of the rest of it really overcame it. I just kind of feel the Illyrians weren't. They didn't kind of set a framework and set a paradigm and a Bible for how they look, how they operate, what they're all about, type of thing.
Yeah.
And therefore, some of the things they went for didn't quite resonate with me. Just because I found myself distracted as to being like, well, why wouldn't you fit in? Because you look like so many other episodes of or so many other characters within Starfleet and that. So,
but that might have been the point. In the only caveat I can think of is that might have been the point. Like, if you look at somebody from the LGBTQ community, do they look really any different than anybody that's not from that?
Yeah, no, and that's ultimately
So that
where I came from, but because they had made it such a talking point
for
that, it was like, what? So, like, it was to the point that I actually went and read up on Illyrians, like, after the fact, because I was like, am I missing something here?
Did I miss?
Yeah, so I get what they were going for, but I think they needed to put a pin on more.
Yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot earlier.
Yeah.
That was the issue, last season.
Self and what you're all about, as opposed to playing on those themes, but at the same time talking about not being able to physically fit in and whatnot. But
that's fair though. That's a fair complaint for sure. But again, the strength of this episode was the acting, the emotion. I just think it's top notch, and it just proves that you don't need big action set pieces all the time to tell a really good story.
Yeah, well, this one had none, I don't think, and it was
there was nothing, and I didn't care. Like, I wasn't like looking at my watch saying, "Okay, where's the action now? Like, where's the big space battle?" Like, I wasn't looking for that, right?
Yeah, and this episode, I'd argue, had more tension and jeopardy than an entire freaking Marvel series on Disney Plus. Like, thing had you on the edge of your seat, and really, it was just a courtroom drama. And even before that, it was like, will these different characters make the right choices, because you didn't even know if she would defend Una at the beginning, right?
Yeah, it didn't look good at all for her through 3/4 of the episode.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't look like it was going to go her way, but in the end, they pulled that loophole, and that was pretty, like I said, that was pretty inventive. So, I mean, we touched on pretty much all the major points. So, unless there's anything else you want to mention, we can go ahead and rate this one.
Yeah, you know what? This one, it's an A- as well. To be honest, like, had it not been for just that little hang up that I had as to what the Illyrians were all about, to the point that it kind of distracted me a bit, it probably would have been an A. But it was just as strong as the first episode, and quite frankly, as a testament to the strength of the show, it was just as good as the first one, but for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
And huge props to the writers for putting together such a strong episode, and also having the guts to do that. So
I'm also going to give it an A-. I think it was just as good, but also slightly better than the first episode, for the mere fact that they didn't have to rely on the the trappings of a sci-fi action show, which is, all right, now, okay, here comes the big space battle, and we're gonna see the ship get shot at, and it's gonna like they didn't need to rely on that, but they relied on the core essential elements that make Star Trek, that I think elevate Star Trek over some other sci-fi action properties, like in certain instances Star Wars that relies on more on the space battles and all that and the action, or like you said, pretty much any Marvel Disney Plus series, which it is what it is. Man, that Iron Man movie was so good way back in Phase 1. No, but I digress. There have been good since, but that's a whole other show. But so like it relies on what separates Trek from all the other sci-fi franchises out there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So they did it so well, and I think this kind of content was something that we definitely need to see in the world we live in today. So kudos to them. They did a fantastic job of it, and so it's an A- from me as well. The final episode we're going to cover today is episode 3 of season 1, and this one was really cool because I'm a sucker for time travel shenanigans to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was right away when I got the sense that that's what we were dealing with in this episode. I was on board, and the other thing that kind of hooked me on this episode, and it's a cheesy sort of Homer's excuse of why I'm going to say I really like this episode, but it showcased Toronto so well. Like it was all over the episode. Like, all right, they're right in my backyard, kind of thing, right? So, and I did. I picked out a millisecond of an establishing shot that featured Scotiabank Arena. So I was like, hey, there's the Leafs again. And then I started getting angry over the Leafs, but that's a whole nother. I'd like to give what's the Vulcan death grip.
Yeah,
there's a couple of Leaf players and executives I'd like to try that move on and see if it works. But no. So the Homer aspect of me seeing my home city in the episode and featured so prominently was really cool as well. But the time travel shenanigans of it all, and sort of the way it ties into a big character in Trek lore, it was made it pretty cool. And again, this episode is very interpersonal. It really focuses on two characters, and that being Captain Kirk.
Captain. Yeah.
How could I forget that name? Played by Paul Wesley, not obviously by William Shatner. And then Laan Noonien Singh as well is the main character of this episode, and I really like the setup where she sees Laan sees on the ship. She sees a member of the crew in distress, and it's one of the. I forgot what the name of the organization is. The Time, whatever I think they said it, but whatever. It's basically the what's the name for it in Marvel? It's basically that organization, but the Starfleet iteration.
The Time Variance Authority.
Yeah,
right,
there it is.
in Marvel?
Yeah, but that's not what. Yeah, I can't remember what they're called.
They're basically that. They're just like.
But that's what it is.
Yeah.
So he's like, you gotta, and he's like, save the bridge or get to the bridge or whatever, right? And so she takes this device and goes to the bridge, and she's like, Captain, we have a problem, and she the captain's chair swivels around, and it's not Pike, it's Kirk, and they're not on a Starfleet ship. It's a Earth vessel. In this, however, when she gets transported, which you can't really tell because it happens on the ship, and there's not much variance between her ship and this ship, so you don't really tell. You can't really tell until two things: until Kirk turns around in his chair and you see his insignia is not a Starfleet logo. So then we get this sort of, we get of course, the exposition of where Kirk and La'an basically, once they get to know each other and sort of, they get the, hey, listen, I'm not from this timeline. When they get all those shenanigans out of the way, then we start learning about, the differences between Starfleet and, this and this Earth, or this universe, timeline, whatever. But the device that La'an has is basically, it doesn't work. Once they get, earthbound, and so they're stuck there. And what's funny was, so they're walking around, and Kirk is like, "Oh, this must be some alternate version of New York." She's like, "No, it's Toronto in Canada." Like, and I'm like, at first I'm like, because I was so focused on the show. This is how like into the show I was. I didn't even realize, but then I was looking at this like that it was downtown Toronto. But then I'm looking at the screen, the big screen, and I'm like, City TV. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I know the show films in Toronto, but I'm so used to, like, here's an establishing shot of futuristic San Francisco or futuristic New York that it's automatically goes in your brain. Oh yeah, it's just probably.
Yeah.
Then I'm looking, I'm like, City TV, is it, or City Pulse 25? I'm like, what the hell? Yeah. So I was like, what? This is kind of cool. And then the cool things that they have to do, like the little things like having to assimilate and like change clothes so they don't look like weirdly out of place with their friggin' Starfleet uniforms on, and the idea of eating a hot dog, the simple, that simple kind of like little pleasure, if you want to call it that, is highlighted. Like, I like those sort of like little things, and then you also find the big differences. So like in this version of Kirk's Earth, his brother's dead, right? And the Earth's the Earth is basically like a battleground, like a war zone kind of thing, and it's kind of uninhabitable. So it's like, I don't know that she slipped into his timeline. I think they've kind of converged, kind of thing, and sort of cross.
Well, the assassination that sets off the episode is that's kind of the flashpoint for where this version of Kirk's timeline commences, right? So that's why the kind of Star Trek time authority guy goes and seeks out somebody on, I guess, the prime timeline, which would be Pike's timeline, in order to get somebody to set things right? Because I guess the assassination that takes place of Khan,
which is the big spoiler,
is supposed, like, it basically sets up that Khan has to happen because Earth doesn't go on its correct trajectory. And I thought that was a pretty cool way of framing not only the importance of that character, but also how committed the Romulans were to undermining Starfleet, because they wanted to. They were willing to completely sacrifice all that they have and all that they know in order to make sure that Starfleet doesn't
Just to
come into
screw over
existence.
Starfleet.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool, actually, that they went as far as they did with that, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I appreciated how efficiently they kind of got through I'm in a different timeline, I'm in a different world,
Yeah.
and they went to just focusing on kind of what's the right thing to do here. I appreciated that Kirk's initial reaction was to just let things play out because he appreciated that his friends and all that he knows would not come into existence if he interferes. So he just kind of took it upon himself to do nothing because he knew
Which is
that.
the normal reaction, I think, for most people. Like if somebody tells you, listen, you have to help me change this timeline so that mine can go back. It's like, well, the hell makes your timeline so special?
Yeah, and I love that it was just something as simple as his brother.
Yeah.
And that his love for his brother was like, well,
Supersedes everything. Yeah.
yeah, and it wasn't the fact that her Earth was a utopia, that the entire galaxy was better off um, having things play out the way that they did in her universe. It
Yeah.
was just it came down to a very relatable thing for Kirk, in that yeah, your timeline has to be the right one because that's the one where my brother lives. So
Yeah.
yeah, I dug that, and I dug how like you can really get bogged down in the time travel and alternate reality multiversal shenanigans of those
Yeah.
types of stories, but I liked how it was established and resolved all within the course of like the 45 minutes or whatever the
Yeah.
episode
Yeah.
runs. Yeah.
And I like the idea of like when she's telling Kirk that oh like everybody know like you're well known in my timeline and and then they're talking about her like she sort of becomes she grows closer and becomes enamored with this iteration of Kirk because he's never heard the name Noonien Singh, so he has no preconceived notion
Hmm.
about her or who her you know her her ancestry is or what her ancestry is. So like he just connects to her on like what's in front of him. Like there's no baggage there, uh, and I think them sort of they're growing closer and coming together uh, makes a lot of sense given what they're going through and what the enormity of the situation. Like what I liked about this episode, in addition to all the time travel and shenanigans and things like that. But what the other thing I liked about it was that in such an intimate episode focusing on really two of our core characters, there's also a larger like the stakes are high, even
Hmm.
though the episode is very intimate, right? Which I like. Like the consequences of this mission going wrong could be enormous, despite the fact that it's all wrapped up and the focus is on two characters.
Yeah.
So I like that. Like I said, I like the way they came together. I think uh, the two actors have had great chemistry together. So it was believable that they would develop, or that this iteration of these two characters would develop like some feelings for each other. Um, so I believe that aspect, and then the whole thing where he gets killed and then she's going to confront the Romulan on her own, and then she gets into the room where young Khan, who's like between 6 to 10 years old, let's say put him in that range.
Yeah.
She's put in the situation of, okay, well, there's a little bit of a hesitancy there, or not hesitancy, but because he says, "Are you here to kill me?" And she stops, and she's like, "No," but there's that conundrum of, okay, you know what this person grows up to do. You could simply stop it if you if the Romulans succeed, whatever happens to the timeline, you stop all the horrors and atrocities that he caused. So it's the conundrum that what other movie was it that I know they had a deleted scene that everybody freaked out. Oh, it was Deadpool 2, where he goes back and contemplates killing baby Hitler, right? And remember, there was a deleted scene. Everybody freaked out. They shouldn't have put that in, or they should have put that in. There was a scene I remember where he goes to the hospital where Hitler as a baby was, and he's like, I can't remember if he does it in the deleted scene or he doesn't, but it's that scenario of the kill baby Hitler scenario. Would you do it to save that many people, or is there an internal struggle because it's still a child? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there is that struggle as you're watching where it's like. The Vulcans had their own, the Romulans had their own twisted reason for wanting to stop Khan, because it would then, in turn, end Starfleet, right?
Yeah, well, they had like a history of doing that too, right? Yeah. Where they had success in undermining human achievement and human development with just like small little pushes of pieces here and there.
But the other aspect of it, if you're like a sane, sensible individual, that imagine being from this universe and having the opportunity, knowing what Khan does, mm-hmm. Would you she obviously couldn't because he's an ancestor or she's a descendant of his, right? So if she would have killed him, what does that do to herself, right?
Well, they had because like the little remote control would have protected her. That's right. Says to her.
But even that's right. But even still, though, like, if you're somebody, let's say, put yourself in that universe, it would the conundrum of yes, when he grows up, he's going to commit endless amount of atrocities, mm-hmm. But he's still an 8 to 10-year-old kid. And my morals dictate that regardless of what I know that he's going to do, I don't know if I'd be able to go through with something like that. You know what I mean? Like if I was put in that same situation, and that guy had no familial ties to me, but I knew that he was a criminal and he was genocide and all that jazz. I still, because the fact that he's a kid, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. Like I could bring myself to do it. Like that conundrum is very real. Like that would I could stop all kinds of chaos, but could I be able to do this? So that kind of thing, it's like fanciful, but it puts you in that mindset of, I don't know, could I do that? Like would I where's the moral high ground? Like where's the moral high ground? Like would it be good to kill Hitler when he's a child, or is it just as bad? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, the episode itself suggests that if she did do that, then it would have caused even more harm than what Khan causes, right?
Yeah. So,
and it comes down to that nature versus nurture thing, because they kind of did some interesting things with Lahan showing him a bit of caring and a bit of tenderness, and maybe that
maybe that'll change a little bit. Yeah,
influences things, and I do also think that as we've talked through it, like maybe this episode gives us a path or plants some seeds to Captain Pike not suffering the fate that he's destined to fate. Or
that's a good point. Yeah.
So maybe that's why we saw this, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah, and they did do a good job of showing that Khan. I mean, if you look at the situation, like he's captive and he's not seemingly. Mm-hmm. Very little tender interaction. So imagine what that does to a person.
Yeah.
You could kind of see why he grows up to be the person that he is based on this.
For sure.
Which is something you never get in the original series. They don't really showcase his backstory, so you don't really get that emotional connection. No. Whereas now I feel like I do feel bad for him. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's just that little added spin really kind of puts you in a different headspace on him. And then when the timeline writes itself, Lon has the memory of what happened. Nobody else does. And of course, she's emotionally upset over Kirk. Like, she calls to check on him, like to make sure that he survived.
Yeah, well, and she's got feelings for him too, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, for again, like you said, for a 45-minute episode, they actually made me care about these two people as a couple.
Yeah.
But they're not, and it's like, but I wouldn't mind seeing them. Like, I know that Kirk is supposed to be this womanizer, and he has so many women left, right, and center. He's got more women than I do on my Multiverse wives list. That's neither here nor there. But I wouldn't mind the two of them. Like, you wouldn't mind seeing them like get together in the main timeline. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to that now. Like, now that I've seen it, I'm behind it. Even though,
and this happens so far in advance of where we pick up with Captain Kirk, right? Because he's not even a captain yet, right? So who knows what journey they go on, and maybe they do have a long relationship. Maybe she marries him and he suffers her loss, and that's why he's a womanizer in the future, or who knows?
Yeah, it could be. There's so many different ways to go. But like I said, I got to give kudos to, I think, Paul Wesley and Christina Chung, who had great chemistry together. And Paul Wesley is doing much like Ethan Peck. There are elements of the Kirk we're familiar with, but in the brief time that we've seen him on screen, the brief times, he is making the character his own in a way, and I'm liking what he's doing. And again, much like last episode with Rebecca Romaine, Christina Chung carried the episode here, and deserves all the props, because I thought she was fantastic. So, is there anything else you want to mention regarding this episode, or we can go ahead and rate it?
No, I'll get into anything else in the ratings.
All right. With that, go ahead. Give us your rating on this episode.
Yeah, you know what? I really liked a lot of what this episode did, and its strong points were really, shoulder to shoulder with the best stuff that this series has had to offer. But I can only go to a B on this one, because like they're weird kind of Canadian montage moments, like the chess montage and like the weird car chase thing, and just their interactions with like the police and everything else. It felt really hacky to me at times. Okay. So I didn't love those aspects. The things that I did really enjoy, as far as their relationship and how they worked their way through this kind of multiverse time travel story, I thought were fantastic. But other parts of it were just kind of dumb or trite, or I don't know. They just didn't resonate with me as much. So it kind of ends on a B for me. Also, why do you have such long hot dogs in Toronto? Like, I'm from Alberta, so we're all about that steak. But
I don't know that I've seen them that long before. I don't know if it's a catering thing or what was going on there. But those were rather long, and longer than any of the ones that I've had personally. But yeah, so I don't know if that's the norm. But then again, like most of the hot dogs I've eaten in my hot dog eating tenure, if you want to call it that, have been store bought, and they're normal sized. So I don't know if that's a street meat thing where it's longer. I'm not sure. We'll have to have an expert in street meat kind of come on and tell us what's the deal with those hot dogs. But I really love this episode. So I'm still going to give it another A-. just because they handled something that is headache-inducing often, which is time travel shenanigans,
Yeah.
so well, and just the relationship with between Kirk and La'an, and sort of the chemistry that those two actors had, really, they got all that stuff right, and to me that's more important than the chess thing was out of place. So I agree there, but I can sort of forego that stuff when the main crux of the episode and the content of the episode is as strong as I thought this one was. So for me, I'm going to keep it the same. It's another A minus across the board. So all three for me are A minuses, but a really strong start to the season with these three episodes. So we're off to a really good start. I've already seen episode 4.
Okay.
But so we'll talk about that in our next batch. But it was another really good episode. I don't know where I have to. Before we do that episode, I'll rewatch it and give my thought on it, my rating then. But yeah, we're off to a good start, and I can't wait for the season to continue as we go along. But that'll bring this episode to a close, my friend. Another fun one today. But if the good folks who watch and listen to this want to continue the conversation with you, where do they find you?
You know what? For right now, just on Twitter there. So Canadian Cape Crusader, CDN Cape Crusade R, is where you'll find me. And yeah, please hit me up. I'm happy to interact or message back and forth on Star Trek or comic book type stuff. Yeah, anytime you like. So that's the one place to find me right now, with maybe more to come in the future.
Awesome. And if you want to track me down, it's at Adam_Leafspan on Twitter. I'll probably have to start putting all the other nonsense social media stuff up on, because I don't remember half of the usernames. So I'll just, whenever another one pops up, I'll just add it to the description below. Speaking of the description below this video, we do have a Facebook group, which you can click the link, ask to join the group, and I will add you there if you want to go that route. But yeah, reach out. We could talk Star Trek. We could talk superheroes. We could talk hockey if it's your thing too. But until next time, remember that Star Trek: Strange New Worlds and the relationship between La'an and Kirk is somewhat forever. From the first time they share an extremely long hot dog to the last. So long, everybody.